Hi, I'm Chris Sangster, and welcome back to the studio. Today I want to go through my mixing process. I have a general process that I like to follow for each mix that I do. Obviously, each song is a different task and a different creative process, but I have a general workflow that I like to use on each mix, and I want to share that with you today. All right, to start out, we have a new session here in Logic Pro. I've already set the BPM at 119 beats per minute, and now I'm going to import the stems. So for most mixes, I'll either get just wave files, a bunch of stems that look something like this, or I'll get a Logic project from the client. Either way, the process to start is pretty similar, which is just setting up the session. Okay, create new tracks. And now we'll wait as all these copy in. One thing to note, I do generally like to start at the third bar with the stems instead of right at the top of the session. Sometimes I find when bouncing things out, if you start right at the beginning of the session, sometimes you can get some weird anomalies in the bouncing process. So I generally like to have a little bit of runway here at the beginning of the session. All right, now that all of the tracks are imported, the next step is to organize the session. I like to do that by first putting the tracks in the order that I like and then also color coding them the way that I like. I have my own way of doing it, my own colors that equate to different instruments and all that. It really doesn't matter what color or order you use, but the important thing is to have an organizational system so you know where everything is in your session and you don't get lost as you go through the mixing process. So I'm just going to quickly go through, organize, and color code all the tracks. All right, so there we go. Now I have my tracks in order and color coded accordingly. We have drums here at the top, followed by percussion, bass, guitars here in green, synth, keyboard elements in yellow, then the vocals, lead in light red, harmonies and BVs in dark red, and then these pink tracks are vocoder tracks. I like to use pink just for kind of any extra vocal elements that might be in the track. So that's how I set stuff up. And the next step in getting things ready is to import my routing system and my mix bus processing. I keep a template always on my hard drive to import from. So here it is right here, Logic mixing template. And I've got a lot of different stuff on here. I won't import all of it. What I really am focusing on right now are these buses right here. So these are going to be the buses that all the tracks are going to be going to. And then finally the mix bus, which has all my mix bus processing on it. So we're going to import those. And here, get the mixer track on the screen. Okay. So here they are. You can see I have all vocals, all drums, all bass, all music, all effects, and then my stereo bus. So what I'm going to do is go through and quickly route all of the tracks in my session through the appropriate buses here. And I do like to create tracks in the edit window for these and for any aux tracks that I have, just to keep things organized and so I can kind of have a visual layout of what everything in my session is. All right, so let me go through and just quickly route all this stuff. Oh, one thing I should note, I don't typically bring in routing on the buses themselves to start with, just because a lot of times I'm working in sessions that other people have worked in. They have their own routing systems going on. I don't want to step on any of that. As in, I don't want to bring, say, the stereo bus in on bus one, and then there's already a bus one reverb in the session. That can just get really confusing. So I'll typically bring these in without any inputs and outputs and then set them up based on each session just to make sure everything is clean. In this scenario, I don't have any routing going on yet, so I can just comfortably go ahead, make this bus one, and proceed like that. So all of these are going to go to the stereo bus, and then all of these will have their own routing. So Logic, if you option click a bus with other buses highlighted, you will get the cascading, in order 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so now I'm going to go through and route all the tracks in the session to those buses. All right, now we have that done. We have all the vocals going down to this track, all the drums and the percussion going down to this track, all the bass to this track, all the music elements. So that in this case, that would be the guitars and the synths. But in any session, that's really just any musical instrument that's not bass. And then all the effects tracks, which I actually don't have any effects sends in this session yet. But once I start bringing them in, I will route all of those to this effects track. And then all of these buses go down to this stereo bus. So on these buses, I will always be running the Slate Virtual Mix Bus plugin. And so that emulates basically console saturation. It has different types: Neve, API, SSL, Trident. And I'm going to say 90% of mixes, I love to use the Neve emulation. I'm just a sucker for the Neve warm sound. And yeah, that's pretty much what I use on all my mixes. Occasionally, if it's something that needs a little more sheen on the top end, I might go SSL. But generally, I'm going to go with the Neve. But as I start mixing, I'll play around with that and play around with the levels in and out and the drive on this Master Bus plugin. So this Master Bus plugin is then linked to all of the channel plugins, which I just have on these 5 tracks. So anything I do on the Master Bus plugin will be reflected on these ones, and you do that with this group feature here. So I also have a limiter at the end right now. I think I'm just going to turn that off to start with. And the other couple little session setup things I like to do, I always like to have a frequency analyzer on the stereo out, just so I can reference it and make sure, say, the bass range isn't getting too out of control, and just see the overall frequency balance. I don't look at it all the time, but I do like to reference it certainly towards the end of the mix. And then the other thing I like to have is a dynamics meter. The one I've been using recently is Insight 2 from Isotope. And once again, just to be sure I'm hitting the right levels and in the right range. So I always like to have those 2 things up. And then the last thing that I still need to get set up is I always like to have a reference mix in the session. And generally that will be just a rough mix that the artist has sent me. I don't too much anymore use other mixes, like professional mixes, as references, for a couple reasons. One, and the most importantly, is you're really referencing a mix against a master at that point. If you're saying downloading a song off of iTunes and bringing that into your session to reference against your mix, you're really referencing 2 different stages of the process at that point. And so I don't find that super helpful. But what I do find helpful is to always have a mix that the client is happy with in the session. So whatever their demo mix or their reference mix, whatever they choose to call that, in this case it's demo 3, I always like to bring that into the session just to make sure that I'm improving upon what the client sent me and that I'm staying within the brief, so to speak, within what the client wants and expects. So I never want to be going too far off of what the client is happy with already, and I always want to make sure that I'm improving upon what they sent me and certainly not making it worse. So I like to put that just here at the bottom of the session and mute it for now. All right, it does look like there are a few layers in here. So anytime I get layers, like say here, kick 1 and kick 2, or clap 1 and clap 2, within a larger group of tracks like the drums, I will typically go ahead and just make a bus for that straight out. Here, even for the lead, it looks like the verses and the choruses are on 2 different tracks, and the harmonies and the BVs. I'm going to go ahead and make buses for those, just so if I want to process them together, that's really quick and easy for me. So for example, here on the kick, I'll go ahead and send that to bus 7. In Logic, that's going to automatically make a new track. I always want to create a track so it's visible in the edit window, and then make sure that I route that back to my drums bus. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead and do that for these other tracks in the session.